The Syrian opposition forces, led by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham or HTS, launched a swift and decisive offensive last week, reigniting a civil war that had been largely stagnant since 2020. This renewed conflict almost coincided with a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Lebanon, temporarily pausing hostilities in the broader Middle East. So, after the fall of Aleppo, another key stronghold of Syrian President Bashar al Assad, Hama has also fallen with little resistance, and so has the capital Damascus. Assad has reportedly fled the country. Now, there are many reports and conflicting reports on his whereabouts. Some claim he's in Russia, others claim he's in Abu Dhabi, and some even claim he is dead. After the lightning takeover of Hama, which actually lies on the crucial route to Damascus, it was just Homs standing between the rebels and the Syrian capital, which has now fallen. The Syrian army has pretty much been in disarray as its traditional allies, Iran, Hezbollah, and Russia, are distracted by their own internal and external challenges, a situation that US Secretary of State Antony Blinken described as problems of their own making. Images of Damascus's takeover by the rebels have spread rapidly across the internet, underscoring the gravity of the situation. So, what really exposed Assad's vulnerability, and especially at this time? Hayat Tahrir al-Sham or the HTS actually capitalized on Bashar al-Assad's weakness. Assad, who inherited Syria's leadership from his father in 2000, is the only authoritarian leader who managed to survive the pro democratic Arab Spring uprisings. His government endured largely due to support from Russia, Iran, and Hezbollah is a proxy for Iran. So, Iran began overseeing the reorganization of Assad's military in 2012. It began training thousands of militia fighters. Hezbollah intervened in 2013, deploying its forces to defend Assad near Lebanese border, and Russia entered the conflict in 2015 with air power and special forces. On the global stage, Russia and China have repeatedly vetoed United Nations Security Council resolutions which proposed to sanction Assad's government for atrocities such as the use of chemical weapons against his own people. This move, of course, rendered multilateral mechanisms ineffective yet again. So, despite holding much of Syria after 2020, thanks to Russian and Iranian assistance, Assad has had only nominal control over a divided country anyway. However, the geopolitical landscape has shifted dramatically in 2024. Russia is preoccupied with its war in Ukraine, which has become a war of grinding attrition. And Russia has been diverting resources to annex more territory and reclaim Kursk. Iran, meanwhile, grapples with domestic unrest, economic instability, and setbacks inflicted by Israel on its proxies Hezbollah and Hamas. After, of course, Hamas's October 2023 attacks. And Hezbollah has been weakened after targeted assassinations of its top brass by Israel once again. So HTS has been clever and it has seized this opportunity, emerging from its jihadist roots in the Idlib province as a proto-military force. Over the past 5 years, it has developed a centralized command structure. It has specialized combat units and advanced weaponry and local manufacturing capabilities, including drones and munitions. Its arsenal, for example, has grown through both battlefield captures and black market acquisitions, including Russian tanks, armored vehicles, and even an air defense system. In fact, it serves as a reminder of 2020 Afghanistan, where US abandoned equipment was usurped by the Taliban. In fact, the pictures that we are getting to see all over internet are quite bewildering. So the group's rise, which is the HDS's rise, has threatened Assad's remaining grip on power rather quickly. After Homs and Damascus, Assad's rule has collapsed entirely. With its traditional backers overstretched and isolated, the president no longer controls Syria. In fact, his whereabouts are not yet known. And Hayat Tahrir al-Sham's lightning offensive highlights the fragility of his regime and underscores the declining influence of Russia and Iran in sustaining their ally and this is going to have major implications for the region. So, since we're discussing about Iran and Russia, why is Syria so important for Russia? Because Russia is not really a power from the Middle Eastern region. So, before Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, Syria served as a key arena for its efforts to challenge the American led global order. Russia maintained two significant military bases in Syria. One is an air base called Khmeimim and a naval base called Tartus. Following the onset of the Ukraine war and the losses suffered by the Russian Black Sea Fleet, Moscow has reactivated the Syrian Express, a critical maritime supply route connecting Tartus, which is the naval base, to the Russian port of Novorossiysk. The importance of the supply network, the Syrian Express, was first highlighted to me during discussions with naval officials in Eastern Europe. However, the recent evacuation of the Tartus naval base marks a significant strategic setback for Russia. By losing its only naval presence in the Mediterranean, and this is in the Eastern Mediterranean, Moscow has also effectively relinquished control of the Syrian Express. The development represents a major defeat of sorts because it severely limits Russia's ability to reinforce or to withdraw assets in Syria without bypassing Europe entirely. In fact, going by the geolocated footage, which was initially reported by the Institute for the Study of War, or ISW, confirms that the vessels from Tartus naval base now only have one viable destination, and this destination is Kaliningrad. So the Montreux Convention is going to prevent Turkey from allowing warships to pass through the Turkish Straits, and this is going to be blocking Russia's access to the Black Sea for these vessels, and therefore the only destination that remains is Kaliningrad. So what is going to happen now? Bashar al-Assad had reportedly announced a 50% salary increase for his fighters in an attempt to shore up morale amid mounting losses. But that did not help. While Russia no longer controls the naval base in Tartus, it does retain the air base in Khmeimim, from which it has been conducting airstrikes to crush the rebels. But these airstrikes have primarily resulted in significant civilian casualties. Moreover, these have done little, these as in the airstrikes have done little to help Assad's army retain control over key cities that have continued to fall one after another. Reports indicate that the rebels are close to the Russian airbase now. Not just that, according to Ukrainian intelligence and also a lot of East European intelligence, Russia is redeploying elements of its African Corps, a unit which is established by the Russian Ministry of Defense to replace Wagner Group operations in Africa. I hope you remember the Wagner Group. And this has been done to bolster its position in Syria. However, this effort to take the shadow instrument route appears to be yielding minimal results as well. Meanwhile, Iran, that has been another key supporter to Syria, has announced a forthcoming meeting with high-ranking officials from Turkey and Russia in Doha this weekend. It aims to discuss the diplomatic process that previously aimed to stabilize border in the region. Yet, recent developments reveal that Iran and its allies have largely lost the capacity to sustain or resupply their militias in Syria and Lebanon on a large scale, even under current conditions. So there is very little hope of a breakthrough from these talks. Finally, what does this merging of theaters tell about options for India? So the renewed fighting in northern Syria involving the US, Russia, Iran and Turkey highlights the complexities of today's global politics, where competing power plays are deeply interconnected and driven by brute self-interest. While both President Biden and President-elect Donald Trump have issued statements saying they have nothing to do with these dramatic events in Syria, US cannot really be absolved of foul play either. A long-drawn conflict becomes a theater of entrenched interests and, frankly, cannot be explained within singularity. We are living in an era marked by overlapping crises. When the war in Ukraine began in 2022, initially the concept of indivisible security from Europe to Asia was met with a lot of skepticism, as many neutral countries, including India, wanted to avoid becoming entangled in Europe's problems, in wars that were not of their own making. And this sentiment was captured very, very well by External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar's well known statement that Europe has to relinquish the mindset that Europe's problems are world problems, but world's problems aren't Europe's problems. While this perspective remains reasonable, it talks of a one way impact of how power transitions and conflicts in one region inevitably ripple across others. In reality, it is both ways. The world has three distinct geopolitical theaters: Europe on the one hand, the Middle East on the other, and then Indo Pacific, each with unique characteristics and reasons for ongoing and impending conflicts. However, these theaters do not function in isolation, as the dynamic of one is closely linked to the others. Now, one could also include, and one could argue that there are also regions like Africa and Latin America in this particular discussion. But a critical factor connecting these three particular theaters is the emergence of an axis of destabilization formed by certain nations: China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, the Kring axis, which is steadily growing. India has always taken a principled stand in the West Asian conflict and has provided humanitarian help and aid to the war torn country. It has also been working steadily to increase its footprint in the Mediterranean region broadly. As far as the different theatres are concerned, India has maintained neutrality and has also remained multi aligned with as many countries as possible. But a return of jihadis and radical Islam in Syria will also have security implications for India sooner than later. Therefore, as fresh ripples destabilize the Middle East, New Delhi's response must evolve to address the still unresolved situation in, for example, the Red Sea region, which is directly impacting India. While the apparent weakening of Hamas and Hezbollah has been noted, the same cannot be said for the Houthis, whose assurances have so far primarily benefited maritime trade involving Russia and China. Even after 1 year, every single Indian ship is still going around the Cape of Good Hope, making maritime commerce insanely expensive. The relevant question to ask is whether India is prepared to take on a more prominent role in the security domain within a global dynamic where geopolitical theaters increasingly overlap and influence one another. There is no escaping this uncomfortable reality today. Security has undeniably become indivisible, and this is here to stay. Perpetual wars, dear viewers, have returned. The link to my article is given in the description box with many more references. I will be back to track how India grapples with this uncertain and unstable world. Stay tuned.